The Industrial Revolution begins, Chapter 19. What technological, social, economic, and cultural changes occurred as the Industrial Revolution took hold? So those are the big focus question, overarching question for the whole entire chapter. So it may not be a bad idea to take and make notes of technological changes, of social changes, economic, and cultural that we talk about throughout this chapter. Section 1, Dawn of the Industrial Age. What events helped bring about the Industrial Revolution? So why this major shift in the way people lived and organized their lives that occurred over the course of several hundred years. So for this particular section, why life changed as industry spread, how agricultural revolution led to the growth of this industry and these changes, and then the new technologies that helped trigger the Industrial Revolution. So if we look at pre-industrial revolution, really since farming began, life didn't really change that much from, really 6,000 BC until this industrial revolution, at least for the vast majority of people. Peasants kind of lived the way that people had lived in small villages for thousands, almost tens of thousands of years. Very rural, self-sufficient. Most of the tools that they had, most of the clothes that they had, they made themselves. Any soap, that's stuff that they all made themselves. And so there's really little knowledge or exposure to the world outside of their village. And so people can be born and not ever see anything outside of a 5 or 10 mile radius. And that's the way life has been for the vast majority of people for most of human history. And it's only the Industrial Revolution that's going to change that. If we look at by 1850, the Industrial Revolution has really taken hold. It comes to the United States a little bit later. By 1860, 1870, the United States is pretty well industrialized. But most people are moving to industrial cities. The other thing that you see is major changes in terms of transportation with train or steamships. And that's what you see in the background here. You see a train, you see a steamship. You also see telegraph lines taking place, and so now all of a sudden information can travel around the world. And you get also a number of new inventions and scientific firsts. Anesthetic, antiseptic, sewing machines. And so really what we know about the world and understand about the world is changing pretty rapidly as well. So agriculture is really what spurs this whole thing. Farming methods improve, and there's a number of reasons behind that. One is this enclosure movement and the fact that you have fewer and fewer landowners having bigger and bigger farms. And that gives them the ability to experiment, the ability to play around a little bit. Because now if they have 500 acres or 600 acres or nearly 1,000 acres, and you take 20 acres and you experiment with it, if it works, great. If it doesn't, oh well. But if you're a small farmer and all you have is 30 acres, you can't really experiment. This is really going to kind of help. And so all of a sudden you see the use of fertilizer. You got Lord Townsend, who begins a new crop rotation that's going to increase the amount of food available, and it's also going to increase the fertility of the soil. And then you've also got Jethro Tull, who invents the seed drill, which means that you're going to have less and less seed that gets wasted, and they're going to be in these nice, neat rows, which is going to help later on when you go to harvest. So agriculture spurs industry, again, this enclosure movement, and you can see what happens as these common lands and small farmers get gobbled up by the bigger and bigger farmers, and that's going to do a number of things. One is it's going to lead to the things that we talked about in the previous slide, but the other thing it does is it forces these small farmers off of their lands, and it's going to provide a workforce. And you can see how this enclosure movement really picks up steam in the 1800s. So the other thing that happens is once you get these agricultural experiments, you get a better food supply. And so that's going to allow the population to multiply. So because farming is getting better, there's more food being produced, you have less people starving to death. And you also, with the changes in the crop rotations, have a healthier diet. And at the same time, you're going to combine that with some of the things they're finding out about antiseptics and avoiding drinking polluted water, hygiene, sanitation, and all of this is going to lead to a big population boom from the 16 to 1800s. There's going to be a pretty big change in this 150 year period, and you can see that in these charts. So the new technology, energy revolution, you've got Savory kind of begins with the first steam engine. Newcomb makes his advancements, and really it's Watt who then takes Newcomb's ideas and is able to figure out how to maximize the power of this steam engine. And this is going to transform lots of things, not just machinery inside of industry buildings, but it's also going to provide the basis of the engine for locomotives and steamships. You also have iron improving, and so they talk about the Darby method and how he figures out a better way to, a way to use coal for fuel, which is going to help because there's more coal available and you don't have to rely on trees, and coal is going to burn a little bit better and longer and hotter and all those types of things. And then you're able to take iron and smelt it to create a better quality iron. So this Darby method is going to make bridges like this possible, and also the creation of the railroads. Just the steam engines themselves, or the engines of the railroad, but also the rails that are necessary to run on them.